Welcome to Baker 85223. This here is a presentation that collates everything Concordium's representative Holger Fischer contributed with during the first ever Web3 Stronger Together virtual summit, where he was invited to a panel discussion on DeFi and the future of lending. This content has been curated for you, so that you don't have to watch the whole panel discussion to hear what Concordium said, and so that you can better retain the information. Consider delegating to Baker 85223 for more exclusive content. Visit ccdbaker.com to learn more.
Please introduce yourself. Let us know what you are doing and how you are involved in crypto decentralization.
My name is Holger Fischer. I work at a public permissionless layer 1 blockchain called Concordium. And I've been working there for approximately a year. I've been in this industry for 4 years now, and I'm not going to be able to give any legal advice or any legal aspect or perspective or anything. I come from a very technical background with a master's in data science and machine learning, and currently I'm working on building a few lending protocols with some projects on Concordium, the smart contract composition that goes into that, how to facilitate P2P lending and decentralized credit. And we are also trying to wrap our head around the new regulation that is emerging, but that's a very difficult aspect. So I'm going to leave that to Jonathan to talk about.
Thank you for the introduction. Maybe you could start by explaining the main differences between the current credit system and the P2P or decentralized versions.
I mean, briefly, how we understand it here at Concordium is it's a type of lending where borrowers, retailers can obtain loans directly from investors, right? So they don't need the traditional financial institutions acting as an intermediary. And most of this happens on decentralized lending protocols or lending platforms, and we use these or online marketplaces to connect borrowers with lenders, right? And it usually involves borrowers filling out an application, which is then reviewed by the P2P lending platform, and then if it's approved, the loan is listed on the platform and investors can choose to fund it, right? And I think that would be a very high level description that's easy to understand for everyone about what exactly a P2P lending is about and what a lending protocol is.
Can DeFi protocols be considered risky, given that challenges related to under-collateralization and exploits are likely to lead to significant regulatory challenges?
Still very early, right? And I mean, you really also get to know this when you work with a lot of these protocols and developer teams who are building, as you do here in a layer 1, right? Because a lot of them are also very worried about what this new regulation that is emerging, what it will do and what it will mean for them, right? Because there's so many points here in terms of AML and KYC regulations or consumer protection or data protection, and a big one that we are focusing a lot on is having your smart contracts audited in a proper way to make, because I mean they are, as David mentioned here before, a very essential part of the decentralized finance aspect, the P2P lending platform, and they must be audited to ensure that they function as intended, right? And that you will not contain any vulnerabilities that could be exploited by hackers. And a lot of these regulatory bodies that are looking into it, they probably also will eventually require platforms to conduct regular smart contracts audit to ensure their security, right? And this is important. It's very important, because if that doesn't happen, and now as Jonathan just said, I'm not here to mention any names as well, but we have seen examples of some of these decentralized networks where there hasn't been enough security, right? And there has been smart contract exploits and hacks, and it has resulted in a lot of people investors not being protected properly, losing their funds, having a bad experience in this space, and then we lose them, right? Because they come in, they burn themselves, and then they leave again, right? But everyone keeps forgetting that we are still very young, and sometimes when the market cap of the industry is 3 times higher than it is right now, and there's a lot of hype and everything, people forget that this technology has actually not been around for a very long time, right?
How to achieve inclusivity in P2P lending and decentralized credit using blockchain technology, and what measures can be taken to ensure universal access, including regulation and cooperation with institutional actors.
Yeah, just quickly, because I think there's a lot of important truth to that, right? I mean, a lot of the regulation that also goes on right now in the EU around the AI system that is being operated here focuses a lot on the ethical and the bias that is happening, right? When it's being trained on specific data that feeds into these models, right? And I think on hear what David said. I mean, this is one of the reasons I'm here in this industry, right? Because when we talk about P2P lending and decentralized credit, we're also talking about, just to bring in, because we haven't talked a lot about blockchain yet, but to bring in this self-executing code on a blockchain, right, that facilitates these transactions by automating the processes of borrowing and lending, right? So I mean, you are removing a lot of potential bias, you are removing a lot of ethical issues also. But then, you need to keep in mind that it can facilitate a lot of important stuff. But then that is where regulation also comes in, right? To make sure that then everything is being regulated, because it is still self-executed code, right? And when you then go into, I mean, how exactly it works in terms of a borrower requesting a loan, and then the collateral is locked in a smart contract, and then you have a lender that funds the loan, and then the smart contract execute on the loan, and then you have various repayment and collateral releases depending on how exactly the specific platform works. I think that there's a lot of this where you are actually protected as an investor, where you are leaving out current bias and current ethical issues that you have in the more traditional way of doing it, right? So I think that is, in a way, a good way to sort of propose how you protect the investor, how you attract a small retail investor as well, because they are protected in a different way, right? And I think this is our job to sort of make them understand how exactly that works, because that is the difficult part, right? I mean, we need to remember that this is all about decentralization, trustlessness, bringing a lot of the power back to the people, right? And I mean, one of the core principles of the industry, the blockchain technology, is decentralization, right? You have no central authority controlling the network. It creates a more trustless environment, which can be very attractive if you are interested in creating systems that are fair and transparent, right? And then when you talk about this self-sovereign ID as well, Jonathan, I mean, right now there's a lot of AML and KYC regulations that should also adhere to these DeFi and P2P lending platforms, right? That they must comply with to prevent money laundering and other fraudulent activities, right? And you need to be able to verify the identity of these users, monitor the transaction if illicit activity happens, and defining and developing this whole system around that, where you are still operating completely privacy-centric, where you are anonymous, but you have the opportunity to be de-anonymized by the platform you operate in if you actually do anything illegal. I think that's a very big step towards this, right? And this also provides this investor protection aspect that the Security and Exchange Commission and Gary Gensler focuses a lot on. I know they are really doing some heavy hits right now, right? And they're sort of doing the opposite towards what marketing crypto assets in the European Union is trying to do. But there's a lot of focus around this, right? And I mean, where I work at Concordium as a layer one, there's very focused on this identity mechanism, being regulation ready, right? And this is also where, when you talk about self-sovereign IDs, being able to hold your own identity in your own wallet, and then by the use of zero knowledge proofs when you are interacting with centralized applications, You then verify specific information such as your age to access a platform, or if you are from a specific country. And then you verify this information, but you don't reveal it or store it anywhere, right? Which is also a big problem in terms of data security, etc. And I mean, this in my point of view, zero knowledge proof, self-sovereign identity, being the owner of your own data, I think that could be for blockchain and mass adoption what ChatGPT just was for the AI industry as well, right? I mean, we are moving into some interesting features here.
So mass adoption of DeFi and P2P lending can be achieved by improving user experience and implementing decentralized ID. But what are the building blocks more specifically?
Exactly. And I mean, if this is a conversation I usually have a lot of this in this space, right? When you speak to people who aren't focusing on blockchain technology, who aren't familiar with Web3, they usually ask me, but it's so complicated, right? We don't understand all of this talk about protocols and scalability and decentralization and security. It just sounds too complex, right? And then I always ask them, but I mean, this is all something that functions and works in the backend, right? So it's all about improving, as you say, Dave, the UI, the UX, the front end. So people, they don't need to know that they sometimes are interacting with blockchain technology, right? It just needs to work. And this, because it's the same when you talk to people and ask them, do you know how the internet functions, right? No one knows how the internet functions, but everyone knows how the applications that's built on top of it functions, because that's the ones we interact with, right?
Good point.
It's true that there is a narrative here in this industry where we maybe are speaking a little bit too much about the backend instead of focusing on developing a united front end, because that is what eventually will lead to mass adoption. And I like that. That is very true. And it also feels like we have a lot of the building blocks out there, right? We just haven't found a proper way to put them together, because I mean, if we just now talked about usability, right, and alleviating a service back in Web 2 that could be easier, more usable, more attractable in Web 3, I feel like when we're talking about lending, right, and we're talking about decentralized credit, that is actually an area where I see a huge future, but we still need to before we actually get mass adoption, as we've been talking about, we need to have the regulation in order, we need to have the consumer protection in order, we need to have the data protection in order, right? And then after that happens, talking about lending protocol built on top of a blockchain that operates through smart contracts, it's easy to imagine a front end where depositing assets is easy, issuing loans is easy, repaying these loans are easy, earning interest is easy, and then various governance aspects towards it. I mean, it's easy to picture, right? But we have the building blocks. We're just not quite there yet. But we're getting there.
Thank you for watching or listening to this presentation. Remember to consider delegating to Baker 85223 to support the creation of content like this and get exclusive access to much more. Visit ccdbaker.com for more information.